What's going on? Well, guys, One Cast Fishing is back, and I am inside my little studio this evening, and I'm starting a series I'm calling a School of Bass. And bear with me, I know that's a pretty bad pun, but it's an education series I want to start here to talk about some of the things I've learned about bass fishing over the years. Things like, for instance, tonight I'm going to be talking about rods, action, power, length. All that good stuff that can be confusing. That when I first started bass fishing, it took me a long time to learn. I had to read a lot, do a lot of research, find things out for myself, just fishing different rods. So I want to share you what I learned. We're doing it in here, and I think in the future I'm going to do some more of these inside the studio because I'm going to put graphics up next to me, kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. I do have some of my rods here, but when you get into like power and action and trying to bend rods and show you what I'm talking about, it can be done. I know a lot of videos have done that before, but I want to do it here, putting graphics up here just to make it a little easier to visualize. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this. If so, let me know down below and I'll continue. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we'll cover here is going to be the type of material rods are made out of. There are two major types, fiberglass and graphite. Now there are composites made up a combination of the two, try to seek a happy medium, but primarily it's going to be graphite and fiberglass. I use fiberglass only for my crankbait rods, and that's typically what they're used for these days. They've been around longer, and they're actually cheaper because they're a little cheaper to produce, so there's some advantages. But the advantages, especially with crankbaits or fishing real deep, is that the rod has more play in it. It tends to bow throughout the entire rod more. That just means that when you're fighting a fish, right, and that makes a long run or changes direction relatively fast, that rod will give with it, allowing, well, I guess there's a less likelihood for that bait to come out of the fish's mouth. Two, because typically fiberglass has that slower action, and I promised I will get into action in a little bit, but that just means that the rod will load up better and usually cast further. When we talk about graphite, graphite is a lighter material, so the rods are going to be lighter, which means it's a whole lot more sensitive. You're just feeling a whole lot more. They are stiffer, or they're usually a little more expensive. But because they're stiffer, the action's a lot faster usually, which means, and I'll describe this a little more later, you're just going to have more sensitivity when you feel that bite. So if you're finesse fishing, using worms and all, graphite rods are what I go with. So that's what I recommend for that. Primarily, like I said, I use fiberglass for crankbait rods. Just kind of illustrate the difference. I watched a couple of videos a few years ago. I think it was Ricky Klein. Anyway, it was one of the old legend Bassmaster Elite guys, and this is when they were transitioning from fiberglass to graphite. He started using graphite rods and started missing fish, and that was because it was a whole lot more sensitive, so he felt that fish sooner. It would set the hook and rip the hook right out of the fish's mouth. So it took a little time for him to adjust from the old fiberglass rods to graphite. Today, fiberglass rods are way more sensitive than they were then. I don't think there's that much of a difference between graphite and fiberglass. Compared to what he was describing. Obviously, though, fiberglass is a lot less sensitive than graphite. All right, so you've probably heard fishermen say, you watched videos or you've just been around guys, and they're like, this rod's got a great tip and a fast tip, enough backbone to get the fish out of the heavy stuff. When he's talking about backbone, he's really talking about power there. And power, I guess in layman's terms, is going to be how stiff the rod is. It's really the amount of pressure it takes for the rod to bend. So this here is a medium heavy, and it's just how much pressure I have to bend that rod. I'll put up a graphic over here to my left, to your right, and that just shows the different types of powers. You've got ultralight, light. Let's see, what am I missing over here? I can't see. Obviously, I don't have the graphic up when I'm talking. Medium, ultralight, light, medium, medium heavy, heavy, extra heavy. And I'll be honest with you guys, there's no set guidelines or regulations for these. Every manufacturer is a little different, right? Maybe one manufacturer is medium rod, maybe a medium heavy with somebody else. Ultimately, what you have to do is look at the rod. For instance, this Mojo Bass rod here is a medium heavy, and it says it's for 3/8 to an ounce lure or weight. To throw on that, and that's optimal for that power. And each manufacturer is going to be a little different on that. So when you're looking for a rod that you want to buy, think about the presentations you use. Are you going to be using jigs? Are you going to be using frogs? Going to be using light tackle, maybe drop shots, etc. You need to look into that and look at the manufacturer. That will help determine what type of power you need. Also, I want to mention power comes in hand into what type of stuff you're fishing, right? You know, if you're just fishing a rocky bank or something with a jig or Texas rig, maybe medium heavy is good. But if you're fishing matted grass, you're fishing lily pads, a bunch of thick stuff, right? You're using ounce weights, out and a half weights, or even if you're flipping a frog out there, you probably want to use a heavy or extra heavy rod. Because when that fish comes up and takes that lure or takes that frog, it's liable to dive back down, and now you got to flip that fish out and get it out of that salad. And you got to have that backbone, that stiffness to be able to do that. So when you're looking to buy a rod, all right, think of the technique you want to use, right, and the type of stuff you're usually going to be fishing. And that kind of goes to the technique too. And then it helps determine what type of power you need to buy. I use medium power rods. It's usually the lightest I go, and that's what I'm going to use in my spinning rods for my drop shot, for my shaky head. Medium heavy is the first rod I ever bought. If you don't have a rod, or you're looking for an all-around fishing rod, medium heavy is the way to go. Jigs, Texas rig, Carolina rig. I even throw square bills, spinner baits, chatter baits on it, right? It's just a great all-around rod. And then heavy is what I'm using for my frogs, really heavy jigs, punching weight, flipping weights, and the thick stuff. So that's really what power is about. Just make sure you look at the manufacturer and see what that rod is rated for on lure weight. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about here is action, right? We talked about power, so power is the stiffness of the rod. Action is going to be basically where that rod bends along its blank. So this here is a fast action rod, and as you can see, it bends in the upper 25% to third. I'll put the graphic up over here, and as you can see, you have a slow action, moderate action, you have fast and extra fast action. And ultimately what that describes is where that rod bends when that pressure is applied to it. So an extra fast is going to be really towards the top or near the top. All right, that's going to be good for, you know, jigs and worms. Same with fast action is a great all around, right? It bends in the second and the top third. Moderate action is going to bend halfway down the rod. That's great for, again, your crankbaits and all, right? When you need to have that play or to have that give. And then you have your slow action, which that means it's a parabolic curvature, so it's going to bend the entire length of the rod. I don't have any of those. They're really used for panfish, crappie. Some fly rods use it. So that's basically what action is. It's where that rod bends. And again, that plays in what type of technique you want to use. And action is, again, it's just a rating. And it helps give you an idea how well you can control a fish once you have it on. Also, it's important to note that action has a lot of the sensitivity of the rod. Extra fast and fast action rods are going to be way more sensitive because it's that rod is bending at the tip or closer to the tip, so those vibrations will be felt along your rod a whole lot faster. Something that's got a slower action, a moderate or slow action, has to bend more when that fish comes on for you to feel that vibration, to feel that fish, that weight. So it's going to be less sensitive. That's why for jigs and plastics and all, you probably want to have a fast or extra fast action rod. I also, for top water, I would like to use a fast or extra fast action rod, just because when I work it, that tip moves a whole lot faster. There's a lot less play in that tip. Well, less play along the entire rod, but more on that tip. Allows me to walk the dog or pop a top water a whole lot faster. So I think that pretty much covers action. I use primarily fast, extra fast, except for my crankbait rods, and then I'll use moderate action. Guys, I slid over here to change it up a little bit. Next, couple more things I want to talk about. First is going to be length. The length of a rod. How long a rod do you need? And to be honest, that depends. What are you trying to do? Generally speaking, a longer rod is going to cast a whole lot farther. A couple reasons for that. There's more blank for that rod to load up, to have potential energy to cast out there. And two, typically a longer rod, your release point is going to be higher. So that way, that bait's got more ability to cover more distance. Pretty simple physics problem there. Second is, well, with that though, longer rods tend to be less accurate. You can be a whole lot more accurate with shorter rods, especially if you're flipping around docks, lay downs. You got to be up close. You got a bunch of stuff around you. It's a lot easier to whip around a 6.6, 6.8, 6.9 rod than something that's 7.3 or 7.6. And then again, it depends really on you, your height. So I'm 5'11". If I'm on top of my boat and I'm trying to pop a frog with a 7.6 heavy rod, that rod tip has a tendency to hit the water. So I'm not properly presenting that frog properly because I'm hitting that resistance there. That's why for my top waters, I typically use something a little shorter, 6'8", 6'9". That way I'm not hitting the water. If you're 6'7", that probably doesn't matter, right? You can use a 7.6, 7.11 rod with no problem. You can use all types of applications. If you're shorter, 5'5", 5'4", you may have to downsize or get a step to put on your boat to stand up taller. But don't recommend that because the waves come by and it'll be a little unstable. But so really, rod length is going to depend on what you're trying to do, how far you want to cast, the accuracy you want, and then your size. How tall are you? What can you get away with? And that pretty much that covers height there. So the last thing I want to talk about is going to be it's just kind of the accessories, right? Your rod seat, right? Each company's got a little different one here. Again, this is my Mojo Bass rod. It just screw locks, screws down. I think that's what most of them have gone to. Some are better material than others. So when you're looking at a rod, you want to see how sturdy that is and how long that's going to last. Cheap ones, right? They're going to break, have a tendency to break. I've seen, you look at the ones at Walmart, they got the zip ties around the rod too, or the reel, sorry, just to hold it into place. And then you got to look here at the, basically the grip here. I prefer split grips. That's just what I'm used to. I think it's a little lighter. I'm comfortable with it. Other people like a full grip of cork. You put that one, there's one right there. You can see that. So there's all different types of grips. That's personal preference. It doesn't really matter. Same thing with the length of the rod butt, right? How far from the reel to the rod. Sometimes you want a longer one, depending on your application. If you're flinging really long casts, sometimes it's good to have a long butt there so you can grab it and fling it and get more leverage. If you're flipping around, sorry about that. Woo! Flipping around close and all, maybe you don't want a long one because it kind of gets in your way, hits your forearm and all. So that's all personal preference, technique you're trying to use. That's up to you to decide and go learn and go play with and figure it out. All right, guys. I think this is going to wrap up this little school session here on the School of Bass. Please, if you get a better name for this series, let me know down below. I can always change it. And let me know down below, too, if you got a topic you want me to cover. I got a couple ideas in mind, but let me know if you want me to cover something that's in this setting. It's conducive to putting graphics up on there. You're not going to have a bunch of wind, bunch of distractions out there, boats going by that messes up the audio quality. So let me know down below if there's a topic you want me to talk about. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, share this, and I'll see you guys out there either on the water or back in here. See you guys later.